You goddamn motherfuckers better pray you never need humans to come rescue your sorry asses. Captain Gary Russell slammed his now empty flask on the table, making the wide-eyed trainee soldiers flinch. He leaned forward, his scarred face illuminated by the ship's blinking control panels. Listen up, Nuggets. Back when the Larcule were about to wipe the Xindi off the face of the universe, their military leader Hydrus sent out one last desperate plea for help to the almighty Galactic Council, to anyone who would listen. The Larcule had better weapons, more ships, more soldiers. It was only a matter of time before they slaughtered every last Xindi man, woman and child. Gary paused, his artificial eye whirring as it focused on each nervous face. You know what those spineless council cowards did? Jack shit. They said the Xindi dug their own grave starting that war. Live with the consequences. Even though the Xindi begged and pleaded on behalf of their entire race, nobody lifted a finger. Nobody except us humans. The council always looked down on us, called us stupid, primitive, said we couldn't control our anger. We didn't have a fancy seat at their bullshit table. But when the fate of an entire species hung in the balance, when complete genocide was on the line, we were the only ones who got angry enough to actually fucking do something about it. Everyone else twiddled their thumbs and watched billions die. So we sent our ships, every last one we could spare, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Gary retrieved a scuffed metal flask from his jacket, unscrewing the cap. The recruits were riveted, barely breathing. The galaxy expected us to cower like them, but humanity, we don't watch innocents suffer. No matter the cost to us, no matter how much blood we have to spill, we'll be there, fighting to our last breath to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's just who we are. The so-called angry humans. When nobody else in the universe will stand up, we're the ones who step the fuck up. Gary clenched his jaw, his eyes hardening as the memories flooded back. The Larcule battleships regrouped, focusing all their firepower on us. Our shields were holding, but barely. Consoles exploded, bulkheads buckled. We were taking a beating. He shook his head, a rueful smile on his lips. But we gave as good as we got. Those magnetic pulse cannons worked like a charm, disabling ship after ship. The Xindi rallied around us, their battered fleet forming up to take advantage of the openings we created. The trainees leaned forward, hanging on Gary's every word. It was a slugfest, plain and simple. We'd knock out a Larcule ship, they'd cripple a Xindi cruiser, back and forth, both sides taking heavy losses. But we were buying time, keeping the Larcule focused on us, while the Xindi evacuated as many civilians as they could. Gary's voice grew quieter, more somber. We knew we couldn't win, not against those odds, but that wasn't the point. We were there to give the Xindi a fighting chance, to show them that humanity would stand with them, even in their darkest hour. He paused, taking a long pull from his flask. And then, just when it seemed like we couldn't take any more, reinforcements arrived. A dozen human warships, fresh from the front lines, ready to rain hell on the Larcule. Gary's eyes lit up, a fierce pride shining through. You should have seen it. Those Larcule bastards didn't know what hit them. Between our jury-rigged weapons and the Xindi's guts, we had them on the ropes. And with those reinforcements, we finally had the numbers to turn the tide. Gary grimaces, memories of that desperate battle flashing through his mind. The Larcule battleships swarmed us like angry hornets, focused every goddamn weapon they had on our freighter. Guess they figured if they could blast us to space dust, the Xindi's spirit would break. He takes a swig from his flask, hands trembling slightly. And fuck, they nearly did it too. Our shields were nothing but a flickering ghost. Half our guns were just scrap metal, consoles sparking, fires breaking out on every deck, hull breaches spewing our precious air into the void. Gary looks down, voice growing quiet. I'll admit it. In that moment, staring down the barrels of 100 Larcule cannons, I thought it was the end. Thought I'd led my crew to their deaths, and doomed the Xindi while I was at it. He falls silent for a long moment, the trainees holding their collective breath. Then a slow grin spreads across his scarred face. But just when it seemed darkest, when all hope was lost and the cavalry arrived, a massive fleet of human ships dropping out of warp with guns blazing, every human captain in the quadrant, rallying to our desperate cause. Gary's eyes shine with fierce pride as he relives the memory. It was a sight I'll never forget long as I live. Hundreds of ships, from tiny single-pilot fighters to massive dreadnoughts, charging headlong into the fight. Didn't matter that they were outgunned, out-armored, outclassed in every way. They saw fellow humans in need, and by God, they answered the call. He chuckles, shaking his head. The Larkul fleet never stood a chance, not against that kind of righteous fury. Human weapons fire lit up the void, tearing through Larkul shields like tissue paper. Their battleships crumpled and burned under the onslaught, nothing but debris and ash in minutes. The Xindi, they could scarcely believe their eyes. Couldn't comprehend that these insane, suicidal humans had just single-handedly turned the tide, that the primitive race they'd always looked down on had saved them from certain doom. A soft smile plays at Gary's lips, but Hydrus, their military leader, he got it. Came right over to our battered freighter to pay his respects personal-like, told me that in all his years, all his travels, he'd never witnessed bravery and self-sacrifice like what humanity had just displayed. Said we had the fiercest warrior spirit of any race he'd encountered. Hands down. The smile fades, Gary's expression hardening. Course, even with the Larkul fleet in ruins, the fight was far from over. Those bastards still had their claws sunk deep into Xindi territory, fortified colonies on a dozen worlds. And you could bet your last credit they'd be back for blood after the ass-kicking we gave 'em. He sets his jaw, eyes flashing with steely determination. If we wanted to end this war for good, we had to take the fight to them, had to hit those colonies fast and hard, before the Larkul could lick their wounds and rally for round 2. It was going to be ugly, brutal house-to-house fighting, but the Xindi's fate hung in the balance, and no way in hell were we going to abandon them now. Gary leans forward, capturing each trainee's gaze. So that's what we did. The ragtag human fleet and the remnants of the Xindi military, gearing up for the final push, bleeding and battered, but still in the fight, ready to take on the Larkul head-on, no matter the cost. Ready to end this once and for all. Gary pauses, his artificial eye scanning the room as he gauges the trainees' reactions. They're on the edge of their seats, hanging onto his every word. He leans back, a satisfied smirk playing across his scarred face. Hydrus's plan was audacious, I'll give him that. Infiltrate the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy, fight our way to the very heart of the Larkul's military command, and blow their AI core to hell. Gary shakes his head, chuckling. It was the kind of insane high-stakes mission that only a human would come up with, and that's exactly why it worked. He shifts forward, elbows resting on his knees. We knew the Larkul homeworld would be a tough nut to crack. Orbital defense platforms, surface-to-air artillery, legions of fanatical troops. They'd turned their entire planet into a fortress, designed to repel any invasion. Gary's eyes glint with mischief, but they'd never dealt with human ingenuity before. See, while the Xindi were preparing their commandos and explosives, my crew was tinkering with our freighter's signature, masking our energy output, modulating our hull to mimic Larkul alloys. He taps the side of his nose. By the time we were done, even the Larkul's own mothers wouldn't have recognized us. With our disguise in place and the Xindi strike team aboard, we set out for the Larkul homeworld. It was a tense journey, let me tell you. Every sensor ping, every comm request had us sweating bullets, but our ruse held. Gary's voice drops to a conspiratorial whisper. When we finally entered orbit and requested landing clearance, I damn near had a heart attack. But the Larkul flight controller just droned out a board acknowledgement and transmitted the coordinates. He leans back, shaking his head in amazement. I couldn't believe it. We'd actually made it past their defenses. The hardest part was over. His expression darkens. Or so we thought. Turns out getting onto the Larkul homeworld was the easy bit. Fighting our way to the AI core, that was a whole other story. Gary's hands clench into fists as the memories surge back. The moment we touched down and the ramp lowered, all hell broke loose. Alarms blaring, soldiers pouring out of every building, energy bolts filling the air. It was chaos, pure and simple. He takes a shuddering breath. The Xindi commandos, bless their hearts, they charged out to meet the onslaught head-on, buying us time to unload the explosives and get our bearings. I'd never seen such bravery, such selfless sacrifice. Gary's voice cracks with emotion. They knew it was a one-way trip for most of them, but they didn't hesitate, not for a second. With the commandos engaging the brunt of the Larcule forces, my crew and I fought our way into the heart of the military complex. It was a brutal slog, every meter paid for in blood and sweat. The Larcule threw everything they had at us: drones, battle droids, elite troopers. Gary's eyes blaze with fierce pride. But we gave as good as we got. Makeshift shotguns blasted smoking holes in their armor. Jury-rigged EMP grenades fried their circuits. We pushed forward, one corridor at a time, leaving a trail of sparking wreckage in our wake. He falls silent for a long moment, gaze distant. Then, almost to himself, I lost a lot of good people that day. Friends, family, crewmates who'd been with me for years. Each death was like a knife to the gut. Gary looks up, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But we couldn't stop. Couldn't let their sacrifices be in vain. We had to finish the mission. For the Xindi. For everyone the Larcule had ever hurt. His voice rises, ringing with conviction. So we fought on. Even as our numbers dwindled and our ammo ran low, even as the Larcule pressed in from all sides, we fought with everything we had, every last scrap of strength and courage and sheer human stubbornness. Until finally, battered and bloody but unbroken, we stood before the AI core, the very heart of the Larcule war machine. Gary's lips peel back in a feral grin. We piled every explosive we had left around that damned thing, set the detonators, primed the fail-safes, and then we ran like hell. He leans back, exhaustion and old pain etched into every line of his face. The explosion. It was like a small sun being born. Blinding white, searing heat. Shockwave that knocked us ass over tea kettle. I felt the freighter shudder around me as we punched through the atmosphere. Engines straining to escape the blast radius. Gary closes his eyes, voice dropping to a whisper. We almost didn't make it. The old girl, she was coming apart at the seams. Hull breaches, fires, atmo venting faster than the scrubbers could replenish. Half the crew was already gone, the other half not far behind. He opens his eyes, and despite the sorrow etched there, a fierce light still burns. But by some miracle, some last scrap of luck or divine favor, we broke free of the Larcule homeworld's gravity well, limped our way to the rendezvous point where the Xindi fleet was waiting. A soft, wistful smile touches Gary's lips. I'll never forget the looks on their faces when we drifted into view. Shock, disbelief, and then such pure, unbridled joy. They'd seen the explosion from orbit, felt the Larcule war machine grind to a halt as its controlling intelligence winked out. He straightens up, squaring his shoulders. That was the beginning of the end for the Larcule. With their AI core destroyed and their homeworld in ruins, their forces fell into disarray. The Xindi mopped them up in a matter of days. Gary looks around at the trainees, gaze boring into each of them in turn. The Xindi, they called us heroes, saviors, said we'd earned a place in their histories, their legends. He snorts. I told them to stuff it. We didn't do it for glory or rewards. We did it because it was right. Because somebody had to stand up for the little guy, even if it meant laying down our lives. His voice drops, low and fervent. That's what being human is all about, rookies. Not just getting angry, but channeling that anger into something good, something noble, using our strength and our fury to protect those who can't protect themselves. Gary leans forward, eyes blazing with intensity. So the next time some jumped-up alien despot tries to push around the little guy, you remember this story. Remember the lengths we'll go to, the price we'll pay, to make sure justice is done. And you make damn sure they remember it too. He sits back, drained but satisfied. Class dismissed, rookies. Now get out there and show the galaxy what it means to be human. A heavy silence fills the room as Gary's words sink in. The trainees shift uncomfortably, some looking down at their hands, others exchanging uneasy glances. The weight of history hangs over them, a legacy of sacrifice and betrayal that they can scarcely comprehend. Gary lets the silence linger for a long moment, his gaze distant and haunted. When he finally speaks again, his voice is low and rough with emotion. It was a bitter pill to swallow, let me tell you. After everything we'd done, all the blood we'd shed, to be cast aside like that, to be painted as the villains, the angry humans who couldn't be trusted. He shakes his head, jaw clenched tight. The Xindi ambassador, he had the nerve to come to me personally, offered me a seat on the council, like it was some kind of consolation prize, like it could make up for Hydras's death, for the way they'd turned their backs on us. Gary's hand tightens around his flask, knuckles white. I told him where he could stick his council seat, told him that humanity was done being the galaxy's punching bag, that from now on we'd look out for our own, and to hell with anyone who got in our way. He takes a long pull from the flask, grimacing at the burn of the alcohol. And that's exactly what we did. We pulled back to our own space, fortified our borders, focused on building up our strength, our technology, making damn sure that we'd never be caught off guard again. Gary's eyes harden, a fierce light burning within. The other races, they took it as a sign of weakness at first, thought we were running scared, tucking our tails between our legs. They started pushing at our borders, testing our resolve. A humorless chuckle escapes his lips. They found out real quick just how wrong they were. Our ships, our weapons, they were light years ahead of anything the galaxy had seen. We'd taken everything we learned from the Larkul War and put it to use, creating a military machine that was second to none. He leans forward, voice dropping to a low growl. The first time a Larkul raiding party tried to cross into our space, we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't even have time to scream. One moment they were there, the next, nothing but drifting wreckage and frozen corpses. Gary sits back, a grim satisfaction etched onto his face. Word spread quickly after that. The angry humans weren't to be trifled with. We were a force to be reckoned with, and anyone who tried to test us would pay the price. He drains the last of his flask, setting it down with a decisive thunk. And that's the way it's been ever since. Us against the galaxy, watching each other's backs because no one else will, building our strength, guarding our own, and always, always ready for a fight. Gary's gaze sweeps over the trainees, fierce and unwavering. That's the legacy you're inheriting, rookies, the mantle of the angry humans, the ones who'll do whatever it takes to protect our own. It's a heavy burden to bear, but I know you're up to the task. He stands towering over them, a living embodiment of humanity's indomitable will. So remember this story, remember the lessons it teaches, and when the time comes, when the galaxy once again tries to put us in our place, you show them exactly what it means to be human. You stand tall, you fight hard, and you never ever back down, no matter the odds, no matter the cost, because that's who we are, the angry humans, the ones who will always stand up for what's right, even if the whole damn universe stands against us. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.